The night sky above Kiev lit up with a terrifying spectacle. Missiles rained down on the Ukrainian capital. The date was April 24, 2025. This time the attack felt different, more brutal. It was the deadliest barrage since the previous summer. Buildings crumbled under the relentless assault. Sirens wailed through the night, a chilling soundtrack to the chaos. When the dust settled, the human cost of the attack became horrifyingly clear. 12 innocent lives were lost. Dozens more were injured, their futures uncertain. Kiev, a city steeped in history, found itself on the front lines of a conflict that seemed a distant nightmare just a year ago. The resilience of its people was put to the test once more. They sought shelter in underground bunkers, their resolve unshaken. Yet amidst the destruction there was defiance. Ukrainians refused to be cowed by the aggression. They emerged from the wreckage, their spirit unbroken. They knew this was a fight for their homeland, their freedom. The world watched as the situation in Ukraine escalated. All eyes turned to Washington, D.C. for a response. Former President Donald Trump, known for his unconventional approach to foreign policy, found himself once again in the spotlight. Trump's reaction was a curious mix of concern and detachment. He condemned the attacks, calling them not necessary and ill-timed. He urged his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, to stop the violence. However, his words lacked the usual Trumpian bluster. Gone were the threats of fire and fury. Instead, he emphasized his desire to save lives. He claimed to be pressuring both sides to reach a peace agreement. Trump hinted at a potential deal, claiming it was tantalizingly close. But he placed the blame for the stalled progress squarely on Zelensky's shoulders. He accused the Ukrainian president of refusing to accept the terms proposed by the United States. At the heart of the peace proposal lay a thorny issue territory. The United States, eager to broker a swift end to the conflict, offered a solution that would redraw the map of Eastern Europe. The plan called for a freezing of territorial lines, essentially legitimizing some of Russia's military gains. This proposal, while seemingly pragmatic, came with a major caveat: Crimea. The peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014 remained a point of contention. Ukraine steadfastly refused to relinquish its claim to the territory. Trump's stance on Crimea was characteristically ambiguous. He emphasized his desire to end the war but stopped short of explicitly rejecting Russia's claim. Recognizing Russian control of Crimea would be a violation of international law. It would also be a political non-starter for Zelensky, who could not afford to be seen as surrendering Ukrainian sovereignty. The Crimea conundrum highlighted the complexities of the conflict. It was a stark reminder that peace, even if achieved, would likely come at a steep price. Section 4. Zelensky's plea. A call for justice and ceasefire. Thousands of miles away from the carnage in Kiev, Volodymyr Zelensky found himself on an unexpected diplomatic mission. The Ukrainian president was in South Africa, seeking support from a nation that had often walked a fine line between the West and Russia. Zelensky's visit took on a new urgency in the wake of the Kyiv attacks. He called for increased pressure on Russia, urging the international community to hold the aggressor accountable. He insisted that any talk of a peace deal was premature. "We cannot negotiate while bombs are falling on our cities," he declared. Zelensky's message was clear: a ceasefire must precede any meaningful dialogue. He stressed the dwindling patience of the Ukrainian people, who had endured over a year of war and hardship. His message resonated with his South African counterpart, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa expressed concern over the escalating violence and reiterated South Africa's commitment to dialogue. However, he stopped short of condemning Russia, reflecting South Africa's non-aligned stance. As Section 5, a fractured alliance, US-Ukraine relations strained. The events of April 2025 exposed the growing rift between the United States and Ukraine. While both countries shared the goal of ending the war, their approaches differed significantly. Zelensky felt that the United States, despite its significant military and financial aid, could be doing more to pressure Russia. Trump, on the other hand, seemed increasingly frustrated with Zelensky's refusal to accept the US peace proposal. He viewed the Ukrainian president as intransigent, unwilling to make the necessary concessions for peace. This friction was a far cry from the early days of the conflict, when the United States had been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. The Biden administration had provided billions of dollars in military aid, but the relationship had become strained. The situation was further complicated by the fact that the United States was heading towards a presidential election year. The war in Ukraine had become a political football, with both Democrats and Republicans eager to exploit the crisis for their own gain. Seeking common ground. The quest for international mediation. As the war in Ukraine raged on, the international community grappled with the question of how to bring about a peaceful resolution. The United Nations, often criticized for its ineffectiveness in times of crisis, seemed powerless to stop the bloodshed. Some experts argued that only a concerted effort by major global powers, including China and India, could pressure Russia to the negotiating table. Others believed that a regional solution, perhaps brokered by Turkey or Israel, was more realistic. South Africa, with its history of mediating internal conflicts, emerged as an unlikely but potentially influential player. President Ramaphosa, while careful not to alienate Russia, stressed the need for dialogue and diplomacy. The path to peace in Ukraine remained fraught with obstacles. However, the ongoing efforts, however tenuous, offered a glimmer of hope. The world held its breath, hoping that diplomacy, not destruction, would ultimately prevail. Thanks for watching. Give me news, like and subscribe.